Manager for Jersey Heritage, and I'm going to talk today a little bit about some of the building changes that happened at Mont Orgueil during the Tudor period between 1485 and 1603, between Henry VII's reign and Elizabeth I's reign. So one of the first changes that we see is at the Cornish Bastion. This is in the lower ward at Mont Orgueil Castle, going through those first couple of big gates. As artillery developed over time, the castle had to be adapted to meet the demands of a new type of warfare, changing from bow and arrows and sword and shield to cannons and sieges. And the Cornish Bastion was built against this medieval curtain wall in 1547. It takes its name from the builder, Henry Cornish. He was appointed to be Captain of Jersey by Edmund Seymour, brother of Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's wife. His coat of arms can still be seen set into the stone. The tower, or bastion, controlled the lower ward with its three small cannon embrasures, while the three downward angled gun ports allowed defenders to fire at invaders using swivel-mounted guns. The guns here could also shoot towards Grouville Bay. The powder and shot for the bastion's cannon were kept in a small powder house or a magazine by the staircase leading down into the space from the prison tower on the middle ward of the castle. This is the Iron Gate. In the early 1590s, a new east-facing gateway protected by a short flanker was cut into this wall. This provided a new gateway leading into the middle ward area and was to help house more artillery. Above the arch, there are three coats of arms carved in stone. Viewed from left to right here are the arms of the Paulet family, Queen Elizabeth, and then Sir Anthony Paulet, which have been halved with those of his wife, Catherine Norreys. It's because of these carvings that the gate is called the Queen Elizabeth Gate. The Paulet family were three governors that looked after the island under Queen Elizabeth's reign. This is the outside of the keep. This is also known as Somerset Mount or Tower. The old medieval keep, which was a rectangle originally, was enlarged and provided larger living quarters for the governor and his family who would reside in the castle. The keep is now referred to as Somerset Mount, named after the Duke of Somerset, who was governor of Jersey at the time, as well as brother-in-law of King Henry VIII. There were 4 stories of new residential apartments, which altered the inside of the keep as well as the outside. There was also an external staircase leading to the upper levels from the middle ward. It was demolished in 1911, but the doorway that you can see here at the first level was blocked up and turned into a window. You can see how the wall curves around the keep. This is deliberate so that it could deflect enemy cannonballs coming from the west. At the base of the Somerset Mount, there are 2 niches cut into the walls, which would have contained large cannon that would fire at enemy ships in the Bay of Grouville, again changing the castle from this bow and arrow original medieval castle towards a siege gunfare castle. This area here is called Caesar's Fort. The reasons for that are unknown at the moment. These outer works here are reached through a small sally port and a series of steps which were probably connected with a roof onto the side of the castle. Most of what remains here is what remains is an 18th century musketry platform, but originally this would have been built in the 16th century. This mount gate here was originally finished in 1551 and had a tower above it. It was guarded with a portcullis, and a date stone of 1551 was put above it by Sir Hugh Paulet, one of the governors. He had paid for renovations and rebuilding of the castle from his own money, a huge sum at that time of £950. Just past the corridor, inside, is the Porter's Lodge. Another level was added here under the governorships of the Paulet families. Not all of the rooms inside the Somerset Mount and the residential keep were meant to act as living quarters. This room, the Witch's Room, would have had its own large cannons, which were pointed to protect the southern side of the castle. There were 3 cannon embrasures on the side of this room. An artillery store was directly below this room to allow for easy access to gunpowder and ammunition to the gun crews. The Great Hall, built as a new modern hall, was during the remodelling of the keep and was used as the main area for entertaining and dining. The previous hall in the castle, the medieval Great Hall, was changed into kitchens with a new wall, fireplace, bread oven and chimney added. In this Great Hall, you can see the remodelling on the left-hand side of the castle of a D-shaped space with the other side of the wall with staircases that lead nowhere anymore. You can, however, see the fireplace and the position of the timber beams. Next, we move on to the residential apartments. These are the rooms inside the castle that were used for people to actually live in. There were 4 new stories of residential apartment, and this room here is probably the captain's or governor's room, as it has a small room attached to it and is close to the Great Hall. In it is a portrait of Sir Anthony Paulet, the 3rd and last of the Paulets to be governor of the island and rebuilders of Mont Orgueil. It is a very, very fine portrait, painted by Marcus Gerhardt the Younger. The Grand Battery, or Rumpier, was built during the second half of the 16th century as a response to the increased use of cannon. It wraps around the Somerset Tower, that keep, but appears to have been left unfinished. There are holes in the wall, and these are known as putlock holes, and they were used to hold scaffolding or building platforms. When work was completed, they could either be closed up or left open, like they are at Mont Orgueil, and they serve as weep holes, which allow water to drain out of the fill of the thickened walls. They also nowadays are home to some of the green lizards of the castle. This unfinished section of the Grand Battery contains some dressed stones, which are stones reused from religious properties such as the monasteries or churches, in infill rubble, which would suggest a date in the second half of the 16th century, when Henry VIII had closed down the monasteries and churches. New subsidies resulted from the governor's appeal, brought new money of £300 from the Exchequer in England. But whilst there was public money to spend on the Grand Battery again, one of the Paulets continued to lack in his last years was the professional help which had transformed Mont Orgueil previously. Whilst previously France had remained the main threat, it was now Spain, and that remained the islanders' principal worry throughout most of the 1590s, the last few years of Elizabeth's life. But still, the castle's Grand Battery was still not finished, even though new stocks of gunpowder and other munitions were assembled in Jersey in the summer of 1592. It was against enemy fire from that hill that Popinjay, a great castle builder, had placed his mighty bulwarks in the 1560s. The Paulet governors went along with his design, and then Paul Ivy had been sent by Queen Elizabeth I to Jersey to look at the state of the castles. He was an engineer of the next generation, but with personal experience of siege warfare. And while he began to modernise the Grand Battery with up-to-date angle bastions, he must have known from the start that there was little he could do. Should the castle be besieged, it would no longer be able to shelter its garrison from bombardment. The technology was too good. The situation was hopeless for Mont Orgueil, but nobody had been willing to say so as much on the island. It took an outsider, Paul Ivy, to tell Queen Elizabeth that her money had been wasted and that she needed to stop spending at Mont Orgueil. It was then decided to build a new fortification in St. Aubyn's Bay, and in 1594 the upper keep at Elizabeth Castle was built and cannons placed there. A large residence for the governor was built, and the first governor to use it was Sir Walter Raleigh, most famous for exploring the New World, trying to find El Dorado, and credited with bringing potatoes and tobacco to England and Europe. He was a good governor for Jersey, setting up the land registry, and was a popular governor. Unfortunately, in 1603, he ended up on the wrong side of Elizabeth I's favour and was imprisoned in the Tower of London after 3 years of being Jersey governor. The aim of the Tudor builders at Mont Orgueil was to try and change it into a castle that could withstand the technology of siege guns and long-range cannons. And despite many changes internally and externally at the castle, it was eventually agreed that it would never be able to do so. It was saved from total demolition by Sir Walter Raleigh. It did have its uses again during the reign of the Stuart kings as a prison for people from England and for accused witches in Jersey. It was after this that Elizabeth Castle then became the most up-to-date fortification defending the island perfectly set up for the new cannon technology of Mont Orgueil Castle was over.